Good morning, my name is Stephen Capaldo and it is Thursday, February 29, 2024. So happy leap year day, or whatever the correct greeting is. We get an extra day. Anyway, today I would like to talk to you about sensuality to spirituality, and what we are, what we have that constitutes our sensuality, and how we also have an opportunity to convert that or supplement that with spirituality. So it's kind of like the voyage or the trip or the process of going from sensuality to spirituality. And the sensuality part of it is really very simple. We all know about the five senses. I'll be talking about our five soul spirit senses, and I have some passages from the text, to add to that a little bit, and then maybe talk a little bit at the end about if you are operating not only in your five physical senses but also in your soul spirit senses, that how would you know that? What evidence would you have of that? If you're operating in the spirit, it's the evidence of things unseen, right? It's sort of the invisible. There's what you see, and then what you perceive spiritually, right? So the five physical senses are very clear. We all know them. We all learned them in school. Touch and smell and taste and sight and hearing. And really what the text teaches us is that this is really kind of the way the old covenant went. With the Hebrew Israelites, they operated with commandments written on tablets of stone, right? You could see them, right? And the difference between the old and the new, through the blood of Christ and through the work of Christ, is that now you have these commandments written on the heart, but you can't see them. That really they are spiritual. So what the commandments are, of course, they don't disappear, but what they are now, they are interpreted spiritually, because we have this new mechanism, this new lens, this new filter, through the work and the blood of Christ, of Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus. So that's really kind of one contrast. When people say, well, I only want to do the Old Testament, or I only want to do the New Testament, well, they really do go hand in hand, but it takes a while to kind of learn how they go hand in hand. The Old Covenant was basically, you could call it, what was the task that was given to the Hebrew Israelites? The Hebrew Israelites were given what I think Jesus called in Matthew 28 the Great Commission: go out into the world and make disciples. That was really, they were, if you want to call them selected or chosen, they were chosen to do that, the Old Testament Hebrew Israelites. But by and large, they turned away from God. I mean, some people obeyed, but most didn't. They turned away from God. So who fulfilled that Old Covenant? It was Christ. Christ fulfilled that Old Covenant. Now we have the New Covenant. It doesn't mean that commandments go away, but it means that we interpret them differently. We interpret them through the eyes of the heart, rather than just through the eyes that can see on the tablets of stone, or on the paper of a book, or on the screen of a computer. So that's a little bit about the five physical senses. Now the five soul spirit senses, very often they're taught in this way, that you have things like intuition, peace, foresight, trust, and empathy. Those are now you can describe them a little differently. You can use different terminology. Foresight could be something like discernment. Intuition, I don't know. You have some ability to interpret or analyze things. Empathy is really a form of sympathy, but it's a little bit more personal. But I'll just go through some passages just to show that in the text, these soul spirit senses, which come alongside and complement the physical senses, that they really are something real, and they're really part of the idea of seeking truth and spreading truth and living in your calling. Because if you really make that transition from pure sensuality to spirituality, then that's the time when you're approaching the true calling that God has given you. I mean, we're called to love, to love God and love ourselves and love our neighbor. The law of Christ, that really comes from the Old Testament, but it's embodied in the New Testament by Christ and the law of Christ. That's the general thing that everyone is called to do. As we do that, there are more specific, customized, individualized things that we're called to do. We may have a particular talent or skill in some area, so we go do that. We may have a desire to build or lead or teach or whatever it is, whatever that calling is, as you're showing the love of God, as you're fulfilling the law of Christ, or Shema it was called in the Old Covenant. That's how you proceed. That's how you grow in truth. That's how you ascend spiritually, and you achieve the highest possible standing with Christ that you can in this life, which then takes you into the new earth. We're making a transition. We've had the Old Covenant, and it's been fulfilled. Now we have the new covenant. We're headed to new earth. That's the way it's going. So I say to people that I'm a believer in the new covenant, but I'm also a believer in new earth. That eventually the old things fade away, and we have Christ. We have the resurrected Spirit of Christ, on the throne over the land, and you can interpret the land differently. It can be the entire planet Earth. It can be centered in one place. But I think basically that the earth is going to become new, and it is in the middle. That's in the middle of happening. God is making transformations as people awaken to the truth of the Holy Spirit and the truth of Christ. But it's very slow, because there are a lot of things that are holding it back. The actions of evil people, of course, but also, our own just stubborn adherence to things like religion and government, and, this Romans 13 thing that, someone holds a position of authority, so you just kind of roll over and play dead. I think sometimes, I would not be advocating for a rebellious spirit against God, but sometimes you do need to rebel against what is evil. And if that evil happens to be placed in the seat of authority, I think you have a right, maybe more than a right, maybe you have an obligation as a follower of Christ, Christian in that sense, follower of Christ, the mind of Christ, to say something. And nowadays what we have is more people waking up, which is a good thing, but there are a lot of other people that need to wake up. And we were saying, discussing, what do you make of Trump? Because Trump, he's got a very controversial background. He's got a very controversial personality. There's a lot in his background that speaks to the big corporate interests that people are trying to fight against. World Economic Forum. There's a lot in his background that suggests some contact with those environments. But it could be kind of a trick. It could be kind of the plan, so to speak. That he should be getting closer to certain people to give a certain appearance and then come in with some changes. He first came in, I think it was 2016, and he did some things, but there were a lot of things that he did not do. And so then he had to take a step back in 2020 and say, well, okay, people have to wake up more and really realize how evil the place is, how evil the planet has become because of the dark forces operating against the light forces. Now maybe he's called again to come back and continue with what he originally started, but was really stymied, or he was distracted from really fulfilling, or he could not fulfill because he did not have enough people on board who really, not just people who might have voted for him, but people who really understood, what kind of a matrix we live in, and how the satanic and Luciferian forces really are in control of the agenda, or they have been for a long time. Now that's changing, and it's going to change. Certain things are going to pass away, and we are going to have a new earth, and we are going to have peace, and the goodness of God we will have. But it takes a long time because of the history of it, and it's a very complicated history of how Earth was established and what was going on, and then how it got away from people. People chose, but people made a choice. People made a choice against God, just as the Hebrew Israelites in the Old Testament, most of them made a choice against God. For centuries since then, people have been making choices against God. So to restore all of that is very complex. And the divine intelligence of God could do it, but there's no point to do it if people are not on board with it. If people are not saying, yes, we redeem the time, for the days are evil. If people are not of that mentality that they have to do that, then there isn't much point for some divine intelligence, deity, divinity, the Almighty Creator, God, to try to force it on them. So I'll just go through a few passages on intuition, or kind of insight or discernment, from Proverbs 2:6. For the Lord gives wisdom, right? And that's really, Christ is the power and the wisdom of God. Really, that's what Christ is. For the Lord gives wisdom, And from his face come knowledge and understanding. So that's all part of intuition. If you have knowledge and understanding, wisdom is what interprets it. And wisdom is, if you go through it, it's the divine feminine, right? Because all of the words for wisdom are feminine, so that's the divine feminine spirit, right? If the divine masculine appropriates that spirit, then the divine masculine can lead the divine feminine and leave space for the feminine to live in the calling that God has given her. That's really the leadership of the male. It's not telling people what to do. It's not being better than someone else. It's that leaving the space for the divine feminine and the feminine to operate in their calling from God. Not blocking that, not obstructing that. So that's really a little bit what that's about. And then John 14:26. But the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all things that I said to you. So there's the Spirit, right? Christ is the wisdom and the power of God and teaches us by the Spirit, and all of that comes from the Creator. The Creator is, the parent. So there's the parent, there's the offspring, and then there's the Spirit, or the energy that makes it all work. So you've got the three components, right, of creation, and then it goes out from there. And then, so intuition was one of the soul spirit's senses, and then peace is one. I have something from Isaiah, if I can get to it. Okay. Well, it's Isaiah 26:23, so maybe I'll just go past that one and go to, I'll go to that one in 2 Thessalonians. 2 Thessalonians, this is 3:16. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace always in every way. The Lord be with you all. So this is really the intent, is that we should have the peace of God, which passes all understanding. And sometimes when you see people who are truly living in peace, they have a different demeanor, they have a different bearing about them. They're calm, and nobody can do it all the time. But even in the face of tribulation and things going wrong and different trials that happen, that they are able to find the peace of God because they've asked for it, they've developed it, and it's just something within them now. It's a soul. It's a sense. It's a spiritual sense. It's a soul sense, is that they have this peace in them. Just like they have this intuition in them, which allows them to see through certain things. Intuition is very good for seeing through the BS, right? You need intuition, you need discernment, you need that wisdom that will help you interpret knowledge and understanding. You might have some knowledge, you might have some understanding, but it's true wisdom that allows you to cut through the BS and find out what is really true and what is really not true. And that's really what I'm going to talk about in a little while too, is that the evidence that you're operating in the soul spirit senses is that really you desire authenticity. You don't want fake life, you don't want fake marriage, you don't want fake solutions to problems. It's a really big problem nowadays, is that people will sort of get together in a group and they'll do some brainstorming, and maybe they'll write things up on a whiteboard or a piece of paper or something, and come up with all nice sounding words, and then think they have developed a solution. Like, we need better communication. It's one of these cliches. People say we need to communicate better. Okay, what does that mean? If a group of people are having a problem with communication, what does it mean? And are we just developing some kind of buzzwords without any spiritual reality or strength of God or power of God behind it? Or is it really an authentic solution? And I think that's a trap that you fall into when you're in the matrix, is that you do homework on things and you come up with certain solutions, but they're not really solutions because they lack the authenticity of God. So we have intuition, we have peace. Foresight is another one. I have something from Proverbs 29, verse 18. There shall be no interpreter of the law for a lawless nation, but he who guards the law is very blessed. So, in other words, why do you need someone to interpret the law if people are behaving in a lawless way, right? But he who guards the law is very blessed. So if you follow the law of Christ, which is really what the law is, the law of Christ, if you follow that, that is an act of foresight that maybe some of your peers or your colleagues don't have, is that you know what you have to do, is that you have to follow the commandments of God. You have to, follow the love of God, love yourself, love your neighbor, follow the law of Christ. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that type of thing. And if you do that, I mean, you do that, one reason for doing that is that you have the foresight, you have the discernment, it's kind of like intuition a little bit, to see that if you don't do it, what are the consequences? And a lot of people, unfortunately, they seem not to see that if they don't follow God, if they live a lawless life, if they live a godless life, if they live without the truth of Christ and the power and the wisdom of Christ and the Spirit, if they live without all of that, then they're going to lack foresight. They're going to reach a certain crossroads and then they're going to go the wrong way because they don't have the foresight, they don't have the intuition, and they don't have the peace also to trust, which is another one, the next one, to trust that, this is the way to go, is that faith is, the evidence of it's things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen, right? So you have to have the trust, really, which you can't see trust, it's not something you can touch, but it's something you can feel, you can experience, you can have it, if you have the Word and you have internalized the Word and truth. And you ask for it. You have not because you ask not. I mean, you will develop faith and trust in all of these spiritual senses if you ask for the means to do it. If you ask for the circumstances that would allow you to see things and make certain decisions that put you on that path, that take you away from simply being a sensual, carnal individual. Another word for sensuality would be carnality, someone who only operates in touch, smell, taste, sight, hearing. And we've had a lot of people in our lives who kind of put us down because we're trying to look for the love of God, and we're not necessarily looking for blood relatives who kind of stab us in the back, right? I mean, there's a big difference there. It's much better to have the love of God from someone who truly, to receive that love from someone who truly has it for you, than to chase after blood relatives who are content on ripping you off and stabbing you in the back. And a lot of people don't realize that, but it's a very important lesson to learn. And I hope, if there's someone out there for whom that statement is intended, I hope that those people will learn that lesson. And Proverbs 22:3. An astute man, wise, I guess, seeing an evil man severely punished, is himself instructed. So what's the instruction is, keep your nose clean, right? Spiritually clean, your spiritual nose clean, right? Otherwise the same thing might happen to you. Because God is a God of justice. If you don't have certain guidelines or laws or something to follow, no morality, no ethics, you don't have justice. If you don't have justice, you don't have peace. You remember all those signs in the demonstrations back in the day, no justice, no peace, right? I always wanted to be in one of those demonstrations, no justice, no peace. But that's true. If you don't have the morality, you'll never have the justice. If you don't have the justice, you won't have the peace. If you don't have the peace, you won't have the prosperity. And I don't just mean making a lot of money, but it could be financial prosperity, but abundance. You won't have the abundance in general. So when you think no justice, no peace, that these are just radical nincompoops, well, it isn't just that. There is something to that. That without morality and ethics, you don't have justice, and you don't have peace, and you don't have the abundance that God comes from God, of which God is the source. Foresight, I'll give you something in Hebrews. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith, I wasn't quite remembering it exactly correctly. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. And 27, by faith he forsook Egypt, he forsook sensuality, carnality, the world system, he gave it up, not fearing the wrath of the king. So by faith, opposite of fear, right? By faith he did not fear the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible, this divine intelligence, the almighty creator, the invisible. Right? And so the last two, we have intuition, peace, foresight, trust. Trust is the next one. I have Psalm 37:5, if I can get to that one. 37:5. Reveal your way to the Lord and hope in him, and he will do it. And Matthew 6:25. Therefore, I say to you, do not worry about your life. There's your faith, there's your trust, right? So trust and faith obviously have a lot to do with each other. What you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? And not to be silly and say we don't need food and clothing, certainly we do need food and clothing, but is not your life about more than that? Is not your life about the quest for truth? Is not your life about knowing who the Almighty Creator really is, knowing the Creator in Christ and being led by that Spirit and getting that, wisdom and being able to appropriate that power to live in the calling that the Creator has for you when He created you? And so intuition, peace, foresight, truth, and another one is empathy. I've got two more left. One is 1 Peter 3, verse 8. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. That's another way of empathy. It's sympathize, but it's a bit more personal, and a bit more focusing on the experience of interacting with people. Love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous. Be tender-hearted, be courteous. You can do that, and you can do that with people that maybe you don't like very much. I mean, that's really the test of true spirituality, is that you can receive someone in love and tenderheartedness and courtesy, even if you don't like them very much. And then, of course, when the conversation gets nasty from the other end, okay, we're done. You have the right to say that. That's the other side of that. But this is a big test for all of us. If someone is there. Can you receive them with the love of God, even if you've been burned by them many times, and you've had bad experiences with that person, and they've said nasty things and done nasty things? Can you still be courteous to them and be tender-hearted to them and show them the love of God, regardless of that? And then, like I say, when they get nasty, goodbye. We're done. Fair enough. They couldn't live with your trust. They couldn't accept your trust. They couldn't accept your faith. And all I can say is, if there's people there to whom this applies, may this be a blessing to you. And Matthew 25:35-36. For I was hungry and you gave me food, right? I trusted you, right? You empathize. You had empathy for me, and I trusted you. I had faith. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. So anyway, that's kind of a summary of the 5 physical senses and the 5 soul spirit senses. And I'll just go now, we're almost at the end, I'll go fairly quickly through the evidence of the fact that you're using these soul spirit senses. And one of them I already touched on a little bit, the desire for authenticity. Fake this and fake that, you don't want it anymore. You don't want fake news, you don't want fake relationships, you don't want fake solutions to problems. If you're in any kind of a group situation, or 2 or 3 people, or even a bigger group, you don't want what is fake. You don't want to just go through the motions and write things up on the whiteboard and say, oh yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then F all happens, nothing happens. So it's a desire for authenticity. If you have that desire for authenticity, then you're starting to operate more in the soul and spirit senses. And there are other desires that you have. More time in nature. I think one of the things that I feel good about now is that I'm further away from the urban environment and more in the rural environment, and I think that's very good. And I mean, it's not that I have to go barefoot all the time, although would be a good thing. But more time in nature, that you enjoy that. You see the handiwork of God's creation, right? And you can appreciate that a little more than if you're just in the concrete place, And I spent a lot of time in concrete places, and fortunately I didn't get buried in concrete in one of these places. But I think just it is a way to get closer to God. And maybe you remember the poem. I don't know if you remember the poem from school. It ended something like. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree, right? So I know that's kind of a silly, kind of grade 5 poem, but if you can kind of think that way, is that who made all this, right? Who made it? Where does it come from? And I think that if you really are living in authenticity, you start to take your body more seriously. You really take on board that the body is the temple of the soul, and so that might result in, you know, a change in diet and just having a taste and desire for things that are healthier. And I know there are some problems getting really healthy food, because even the food they tell you is healthy, sometimes you don't know how it's been treated, right? I mean, there is that problem, but at least start by focusing on the outside aisles of the supermarkets, which have the fruits and vegetables and fresh stuff, and not paying so much attention to the inside aisles of the supermarket, which have all the processed and inflammatory stuff, right? Just things like that. And this one now, living in the present. You know, live now, love now. You know, you'll find out, if you want to remember where you came from, not just your body in this life, but your eternal soul, where your eternal soul came from, you can do that. And if you know, you'll have a sense of where you're going in future as well. But really, the idea of really spiritual living and using these soul spirit senses is that you live in the present. You deal with things in front of you. What's past, you learn from it. What's future, yeah, it's going to happen. You deal with whatever it is. And different things happen, and especially as we go through this period of phasing out the matrix and bringing in new earth, different things are going to happen. You're going to go this way and go that way, and something's going to be positive and something's going to be negative, and you're going to run into positive people and negative people. But you live in the present. You deal with the situation in front of you based on the principles of the mind of Christ, the Word of God, the Word of truth, based on the soul spirit senses, and you using, where needed, the 5 physical senses. You need the 5 physical senses. It's just that we all get trapped into just using them, and we become very carnal and very legalistic and very self-righteous, and just not very kind and caring when we limit ourselves to the physical senses. So I hope that this message was useful in some way, and I'll stop there for now. And again, happy Leap Year Day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.